So let's get started. Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to our 31st Platform Academy. We are here every other week and we speak about platform foundation topics. We talk about workflow automation and other platform tools, like anything for admins and developers. Today we have a special topic, and I brought in outside help from my colleagues out of Product Success and Outbound in Creator Workflows for Automation Engine with Daniel and Joe, because today we'll be speaking about getting started with integrations on the Now platform. I'm sure a lot of you have already worked with integrations. I hope a lot of you have seen the amazing video series by Chuck Tomasi on the developer program page. If you haven't, I've put a link in the resources and I encourage you to check that out, just to get that out of the way at the start, because this is a big topic and we won't be able to address everything that is to do with integrations on the Now platform, but we'll give it a good try. So before we head into things, I think we'll do a quick round of introductions. My name is Lisa Holenstein. I'm an outbound product manager for the Now platform. As I said, I specialize in workflow automation, that is flow designer, process automation designer, decision builder. And we newly also took over advanced work assignment. So that'll be a new thing. Then we have my colleague, Daniel. Please give a quick introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So, hey, I'm Daniel Draes. I am a Principal Product Success Manager, something like that. This is what they call me, right? I think that's what it says on the slide here. My focus is creator workflows, similar to Lisa, more on the building apps and things on the platform with a strong focus on Automation Engine, which is the core for integrating to other applications, which we will be exploring today.
Awesome.
Joe, over to you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Joe Wilmuth. I've been at ServiceNow for 9 years now, I guess, and have always specialized in integrations and CMS portals way back in the day, writing jelly and all that fun stuff. So happy we are moving away from that now. We'll talk about some of the newer options to integrate with the platform. My role is Senior Principal, Outbound Product Manager in Creator Workflows organization for Automation Engines, specializing in Stream Connect for Apache Kafka, which is a new product we're offering in Utah, and Integration Hub and Document Intelligence. So we'll talk through some of those options today, as well as some of our legacy integration options, find out what you guys have been using in the past, what you're looking forward to using in the future, and go from there.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We may be hinting about things on the roadmap. As always, please don't make any purchasing decisions based on what we talk about today. As this is a live on ServiceNow webinar, we are consolidating the registration for all our platform academies. I have more links at the end of this presentation, but you can also scan this QR code. We have academies on conversational interfaces, mobile, next experience, all kinds of platform topics that might be interesting to you or your peers and colleagues. So I'll encourage you to check the other academies out as well if you aren't registered yet. All right, so to jump into the topics, our high-level agenda, we're going to be talking about what are integrations, what kinds of integrations are there. We'll touch upon some best practices. We'll probably not go into all of the details for those, but as I said, we'll share these resources with you so you can check them out later. We'll talk some Q&As, we have some resources, and we also have a small bonus that Daniel prepared a tiny demo for us to show you some cool features that we have. So without further ado, let's get into some definitions and terminology so that we all have a common language to talk about these things. First of all, what are we doing? Why are we integrating? All of our companies where we work, most of the time we find there are many, many disconnected critical systems. We've all been there. There's data that's being maintained in different places. More often than not, those are maintained in some Excel sheets or maybe in some manual or very simple data entry solutions. We may have siloed finance and HR processes, and integrations help us connect those systems. We often have niche or isolated automation tools. So having integrations between all of those different systems require different people and different teams to connect different systems, but there's no high-level visibility on what's going on in terms of automation and integration on in any given environment. And last of all, it is so tedious to copy data from one place to another. Sometimes it's email, sometimes it's manual work, manual data entry. We really want to reduce this tedious and uninspiring human work and replace it with more reliable automated integrations to make sure that no errors happen when copying and pasting. I mean, everybody has probably noticed that when you copy from an Excel sheet, you sometimes get a line break after or a white space, and then the text is not the same and things don't work. So we want to replace that. So quick overview, what are integrations? At its core, an integration brings components or information from different systems into one single unit. And these integrations can be the part of or the end result of a process. And this means that an action in one system can trigger something else in a different system. So integrations can be creating new records based on an email. It can be creating records in a remote system based on an incident in your ServiceNow instance, or it can be in a record update in your instance because something in a different instance changed. And that already gives you some idea of the different kinds of integrations and use cases that we will be talking about. There are UI level integrations. So that means some information that we need to display to one user on one end and to support that end user in his or her current record. We can have process integrations connecting client-side or server-side logic. And then, of course, the most common thing to start with is data integration. Do we want to import or synchronize data sets between different systems? Do we want to maintain one system of records that is the source of truth? What is our goal? And for categorizing the different tools that we'll be talking about later, the different technologies provided and available on the Now platform, we have come up with a couple of dimensions or categories. There are too many to, there are unfortunately too many to make sure that we can build a proper matrix. I tried to build a matrix before. Maybe you've seen my blog entry on the community before, but it's just too many dimensions to make it reasonably graspable. So we'll just go through these categories and add them to the different slides. So for integrations types, we'll find that there are replicated integrations. So that is some sort of sync of records from a gold source with one or more endpoints. These are often one way, but they sometimes are bidirectional. Next up, we have the bonded integrations. Those are usually high-level processes or workflows that work across systems. Imagine having one ServiceNow instance where you work your IT processes and another instance where you work your customer processes. You will have processes that span these integrations, and you want to make sure that the states get populated and info gets populated back and forth. And then third, we'll have virtual integrations, and then of course some hybrid versions of these. The virtual integrations are usually reading data from other systems and then display them in real time in your, say, workspace. These could be this could be info from Workday displaying in an agent workspace or in an HR workspace without having to copy the data and make it available in your instance. Next up is maturity, and this is basically your known crawl, walk, run paradigm. So many integrations start out on the low level. There will probably be little to no prior process documentation. You'll have to start from scratch. Oftentimes you'll start with an Excel sheet or a CSV. There may even not be any API available at the remote system, and Daniel has a perfect, is an expert for a solution that we have for these types of integrations. And then lastly, these can be ad hoc or manual integrations. Ad hoc means you have an Excel sheet you want to import. Maybe you import it once, maybe you import it recurringly from a data source, but these are usually the low maturity integrations. In the intermediate category, we'll put those where the processes are mostly discovered or documented. These can be triggered or scheduled. There's usually some form of information transfer happening. There may be API available, so maybe you can use a REST integration or something. And then, of course, the high maturity ones where the processes are fully discovered and documented, these are usually synchronous or scheduled, and they most likely have an API as well. Okay, I told you a matrix wasn't possible because we have a third dimension. What's the frequency? So connected to manual, there's the ad hoc dimension. So ad hoc integrations can be importing from an XML, importing from an XLS, from a CSV, from an email, from a data source, and of course, manual connections through RPA, which is robotic process automation. Triggered integrations can be, for example, data sources, can be integration hub spokes, or also RPA. These are usually triggered from some form of flow or workflow or business rule or whatever kind of trigger you want to make it. And then third, we have the near real-time or real-time integrations. So for example, data stream spokes that run incessantly whenever necessary to get the current data from the remote system, IDR to keep your instances in sync. This stands for instance data replication. And then again, RPA, which is our cool kid on the block because it can do anything. Okay, so long story short, these are the categories. Keep an eye out for those arrows. So I've put those arrows on the different technologies that we're covering today. So with that, Joe, please take it away.
Yeah, sure. So we can quickly go through some of the options that have always been available and that may have, some that you may not have seen yet on the platform as far as integrations go. So if we look at what options are out there for integrating on the ServiceNow platform, you do have, as you can see here, Integration Hub. Everybody's probably familiar with import sets if you're on this call and you're familiar with integrations. Those are very valuable to you. Spokes, which are a part of Integration Hub. As we discussed a second ago, RPA Hub offers multiple ways to integrate. And then there's some of the legacy things in there like scripted web services, scripted REST APIs, all kinds of unique ways to integrate. Really with ServiceNow, as many of you all know, we give you one platform that almost any developer can build an integration or an application on. So we really democratized application development, and ServiceNow platform really takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting of building these applications and integrations by abstracting away that app dev complexity that we all know so well, or some of us may not know so well. And we really have a lot of full featured capabilities. As you'll see here, you have Integration Hub, RPA Hub, Document Intelligence, and then there's Automation Center. And we'll get into some of these here in just a little bit, but because of all of these features that are delivered on a single platform, our built-in governance capabilities really ensure that you stay in compliance with the applications and integrations that you're building. So that's one of the benefits to building your integrations on the ServiceNow platform. And on our platform, your developers, they really get to focus on creating and configuring applications and integrations with low code. And what that means is they're going to be easier to manage and a lot safer to scale if you need to add new features to those. So the first feature that we'll look at in Automation Engine is we can look at what Integration Hub has to offer. So you get to value fast with Integration Hub. It's You're leveraging over 4,000 pre-built actions to use in your integrations. You have the access to more than 175 spokes through the right subscriptions, and you can download and use most of those just directly from the store. And then we have flow templates that allow your citizen developers to make the most of, the common logic and integration use cases, and they can use those to kind of see how those patterns get developed and learn how those patterns work so they can start building their own flows as well. And anytime you come across a use case or something that we don't have a spoke for, you can extend an existing spoke and use some of the creativity out of that to create your own. And then all the connections in Integration Hub are managed from a single dashboard. So you can view those directly all together and click into them and manage them and do all that good stuff. And then, really take advantage of building an integration quickly, but also safely within the guidelines and compliance of your organization. Talk about RPA Hub. So this is new to me. I've not used RPA Hub a lot. Daniel is the pro here. I'm not going to take any questions on this because I may get them wrong, but I will briefly discuss RPA here because I think it's amazing, and I'm kind of let down that I haven't had the time to really dive into it yet. But robotic process automation is a form of business process automation where bots or digital workers, so to say, are deployed as a substitute for humans in routine. So you can think like the swivel chair scenario where you have somebody going to this system and then they're like maybe even printing it off on paper and then taking that over here to this desk, setting it down and retyping everything into this other system. These robots can automate a lot of that, and they can either be attended or unattended. And attended robots are really suitable for automations that there is no human interaction, so it can automate the entire process through and through. They can run on a client machine. They use a series of instructions called a bot process to process the tasks that they're enabled to. And then they also can run alongside the user and support the user in execution to their work. So the user may be able to focus on a totally different set of tasks while this robot's just over here rolling along and keeping the data populated for them or something like that. Unattended robots are suitable for processes that need a little bit of human interaction. So you may get to a point in your process that you click a button and then that causes the robot to go pull data here, do this thing, and then all of a sudden you have what you need to finish your task. So lots of cool stuff going on there. I would love to dive into that world, and I'm hoping that I can dive into it a little bit more, but for now we have Daniel that gets to have all the fun there. And then next we'll discuss document intelligence, which is one of our newest products as well. I love this thing. One of the challenges out there in the world that exists today is being very good at extracting data properly from documents. That could be PDFs or semi-structured documents, structured documents, all kinds of different forms, IDs, lots and lots going on out there. And that data input part, if it's a human doing the data input, there's a lot that can happen as far as error goes there. So with document intelligence, it's AI first design. It takes in and really solves this challenge of getting that data off of those documents into the ServiceNow platform, and accelerates the document processing of these forms and IDs and all that good stuff. And what happens is the AI continually learns and it models in real time. So you scan the document in a few times, and before you know it, you have many documents running through this system, continuously learning, and there's not a whole lot of human interaction. It really is learning how to read the documents, even when they change. And you can set thresholds and all that to make sure that it's correct and what it's pulling off of those forms. And it's a lot of fun. I like playing around with it. Had a lot of fun with that one lately. And it keeps getting better. So that's always a good thing. And that's all for me. I'm going to hand it over to Daniel so he can talk about Integration Hub Import, which is another really awesome feature.
All right. Thanks, Joe. We wanted to pick out Integration Hub, or I wanted to pick out the Integration Hub Import here and also run a quick demo because I believe it is really a cool, great new feature to importing data to ServiceNow. I guess everybody, mostly everybody has imported data from Excel files into the platform, one form or another, typically using import sets. And while they still work, they're still serve a reason. Integration of import is, I would say, just import sets on steroids, right? And it is so easy and fun to use that I think let's jump to a quick demo.
And actually, they are import sets on steroids.
Technically, they are, indeed.
The technology behind will look familiar, but the interface is so much nicer to use.
So yeah, to import something, we need an Excel sheet. So I have here an Excel sheet. You can see it just has some columns here and some data in here. Nothing ServiceNow specific. I wanted to keep it really easy and simple. So there's my data table that I want to import. And I have here a pretty new ServiceNow instance, a PDI that you might be all aware of, that you get at developer.servicenow.com, brand new, running the Utah release. Even though integration of imports has been around since a couple releases, so you don't need Utah for it. But that's the instance I'll be using. I created a table to match my Excel, and you see that table is currently empty. There's nothing in there, so we want to import some data and make them appear here. Traditionally, with import sets, you upload the file, you do the mappings, you run the transform, and all these steps to go through. Now with Integration Hub import, let's see how that works. Integration Hub typing and talking at the same time is sometimes a challenge for me. There we go. Integration Hub import is a new menu in your navigator, and it's there with Integration Hub Basic free of charge, just to comment on that, for example, as we had that on the chat, right? So it opens up a new screen, and yeah, as PDIs might take some time at the moment to load, it's just refreshing. You see, yeah, that's the new interface for Integration Hub import. It's empty. I didn't do anything yet. So there, we call them here integrations. Yeah, we're importing data, so it's some form of integration, you could say. Let's create a new integration and call that, what's that? Invoice data. Invoices import. We just need a name and the description. I'm lazy, just copy that. As you see, I created actually a custom application for my new table. Well, best practice, good practice, working custom apps these days. I'll save that. Let me say here, we get another nice little view here. Okay, what do we want to do? Where do we want to get the data from? And we can see I actually can get it from a file, Excel, CSV. I could actually also get it from spokes, from stream actions. So we do have different stream actions to feed in data into ServiceNow. So if you want to do that like in an automated scheduled fashion from somewhere else, yes, that is an option. You can get them through the store. For the sake of this quick demo, we're just using an Excel file. It's asking
the CSV option is new in Utah.
That is true.
And one more tiny thing, because I know the question will come up. This thing is called Integration Hub import. It only requires Integration Hub if you want to make use for the of the data stream integration. So if you want to make use of the data stream action, which would call a REST API, for example, of a remote system, that's where you need Integration Hub. You can import from Excel and CSV with your regular platform licensing. Just to get this out of the way. That's the only licensing question I'll answer today, but I really want you to know that you can use this. It's awesome, especially when building new apps and starting with data.
Thanks for that clarification there. So yeah, so we selected an Excel file. In this case, we need to select the file. You can drag and drop it, which I actually will do. Just drag the file here. So I'm dragging my file, which is drag and drop. That's cool, right? We didn't have that in the past. And now you see it already analyzed my file and brings me all the columns that are in the file, so I can see the structure in that file. It obviously looked at the first sheet, but I could change like to a different sheet. I can specify where is my header row, if there's some stuff above the header row that I need, so I can modify that. But I already see the structure of my file, which is awesome. That's the first big step forward, right? Once I have that, I move to map to target and say, I want to map it somewhere. I want to map a table, and I created a invoice table. Invoice. I should be able to find that. Come on, search. There we go. Invoice item. That's the one. And like with import sets, we said they are running on import sets underneath, right? We have the option of running business rules, running it synchronously, asynchronously. So we have similar options in here. Let's map that with the business rule. There is no business rule on that one anyway. So I mapped this table, and now I can go here in edit mapping and define what do I want to map where. I can see on the left-hand side now my Excel sheet again. On the right-hand side, we'll see the table, and I can basically just say add all fields. So I get all fields from my table listed here. And in a very flow designer way, I can just start dragging and dropping stuff like invoice number is my number field. Discount goes to, where's discount? Discount goes to this one. Comment, I think I don't have a comment, a price. We get a price over here. You see, it's very simple to drag your stuff. There's also an auto map feature like we had with the old stuff, right? So you can also use that one if you want to. Customer name products is this one. We have here the match column, which is kind of our coalesce that we had before. So I can say I match on the number. Now my Excel sheet didn't have any numbers, but that's just the way it is. On references, I get these little gear icons, cogwheels. I can click on that and say, hey, how do I actually want to look up the information in the target table? Is that by name, by email, by location? Like I'm pointing here to the user table. So I go to name, I can say create a new record. Yes, now you see all these familiar options that you know from import sets, but they're in one convenient interface here, not on different tables, different records. I can also have some functions in here to change, if you scroll to the right, to change the value if I want to basically regex replace, trim, replace, whatever I need to modify the fields as they come in, right? So I have these features available, but that's pretty powerful to define my mapping. And I think if you see here, there's the auto map that I just mentioned. You can all map by field names and stuff. You get some options here, clear, unmapped and stuff. So it's really easy to use. Once I have that, I can basically move on to schedule to click save first. Yeah. Saving that mapping on a table. I could add other tables so I can map more than one table in one go, which is not possible with transform maps, right? There's one target table per map. So you could have more than one. Let's move on to imports, and maybe just I could schedule it from here like a daily, weekly. You can the classical scheduling thing. Again, it's import sets underneath. You can do the same thing. For the sake of the demo, just click on run import and it will run. Yeah, the job is there. Refresh the executions. We'll see it popping up here. There we go. We got that import set. I can look into the execution. I get actually really nice statistics, like say how many rows did we import, what was pending, skipped. So we get a nice little dashboard. We get the data underneath. And that's how easy you can actually run imports. If I now look,
there are more than 9 rows, you can actually watch the number go up.
Yeah, it was really fast now, right? It's a short demo. We are kind of short on time. Okay. You see the data is here. It had the currency, everything is there. It's just imported nicely. It has the references to users. I can click through users and stuff. So it's really, really easy to use.
That is amazing. That was fast. Thank you.
That was really fast. Yeah, that is that part of the demo.
And now we'll have some more integration options that are not talking to remote systems different that are not ServiceNow. Daniel.
Yeah, that's coming back to me. So if I want to stay in the first slide for just a second. So the special case in integrating 2 ServiceNow systems to each other. A lot of customers hit that sooner or later, right? You might actually, as a customer, work with one of your partners or vendors that also use ServiceNow. Right? It's getting more and more common, which is good for us. Maybe also for you in that case. Or you might have actually more than one ServiceNow instance in your enterprise, in your corporation, right? We do see as customers grow and get large, they might have regional distribution of instances for legal reasons or whatever they might be. So you have more than one instance and you need to start thinking about how do these instances talk to each other. So there are special options, special things, right? As both systems are ServiceNow, it should be easier than building a spoke or writing some scripts and REST APIs and whatever. So it should be simpler than that, right? And based on what you want to integrate and how they are actually different options, which might be frustrating as we have too many of these, I guess, at some times. Very briefly touching which ones you have for ServiceNow to ServiceNow. Instance data replication is one, which is kind of, if we come to the type of integration, a replication data. Right? You would use that in-house for more than one instance and maybe synchronize foundation data, user records, org structures, department, things like that that you actually need on all instances, maybe even CI records, maybe, right? Or certain CI records. IDR is, yes, it's a paid for product. It's a separate license SKU. I guess so far, not every customer needs it, right? But it takes away the pain of building. You can have a subscriber pattern and the data basically is automatically synchronized between the different instances. So if you have that scenario, check it out. It's really valuable to do that and much easier than building your own integration.
It also keeps your SysIDs the same.
Yeah, really important
Which is very handy.
Data, right?
Yeah.
Another option that you have is if we are not talking about pure data that we want to move over, we actually want to do or full tables that we want to move over. Let's say IDR is really for the larger volumes of data that where you want to synchronize certain information. If you have smaller subsets that you want to push over or read from another instance, we have the remote instance spoke, which is part of Integration Hub. Yeah, it is one of the spokes. I'm actually not sure in which package the remote instance spoke is in, something we can probably clarify. But that is where you can use Flow Design and build your own integration, saying whenever a change is created, you raise a change task in another system, for example, or when a CI of a certain type is created, you raise a fulfillment task somewhere else. Whatever your integration might be, you can build your own logic around that, building your own processes. So that's probably the most flexible one if you need to build your own things, right? Then one level further is what we call remote process sync, which talks about synchronizing a process, maybe a change process, maybe an incident, whatever process it is. We're actually bonding the two systems together for certain criteria. You might have maybe a CSM customer case flagged as IT relevant, and then it has to trigger an incident in the IT instance. That's where you can use remote process sync, and we will make sure that these two process records are synchronized, including the relevant reference data that is tied to that, like CIs and other stuff. So that's one level above the data, really on that process layer to synchronize on that one.
This is also an awesome tool if you're working closely with partners and they're doing some service delivery for you and you want to synchronize those requests properly, or maybe have these things work more seamlessly. I think those are really, really handy.
Awesome.
And then we'll get more specific.
Then we get even more specific with a product called Service Bridge, which I guess most of the people have not yet heard about. It's similar like our PA News Kit on the blog, been around for, I think, 2 years, something like that. However, it comes from the telco space, or from our TMT, telco management technology, something like that. I think it is the workflow abbreviation. Where we have seen that telco providers typically provide a service catalog to their customers, which they can use internally. Like if say you're buying from Vodafone, right? They have a big shop of phones that they can sell to your employees, and you want these phones to be available in your internal service catalog. That's the intention for Service Bridge. We can select or synchronize these catalog items from this Vodafone instance into your internal instance. And we also synchronize the processes of ordering between the two instances, right? So if you order a new iPhone in your instance, the instance knows, oh, this is coming from Vodafone, I actually need to request it in the other instance. Things like that are available with this Service Bridge. So it's a very specific telco use case for service request fulfillment. Technically can be used outside, but it's currently been licensed and productized within that telco space. That's just where we have seen it so far.
All right. Next, we'll get into some honorable legacy, or whatever we want to call those options. They're still around. We won't get rid of them anytime soon. And if we were, you would find them in the deprecation process. But most of these will stay around. Of course, we have manual or email imports. You just saw Daniel manually import an Excel sheet. Before we had the import tool, we would do that either very, very, very manually by downloading the import template from a table and then filling that with data and re-uploading that spreadsheet. It still can be very handy if you only need like 5 records. If it's more, we'll go with import sets. So using a data source, creating an import set, creating a transform map manually. However, I would recommend to go with the import feature we saw earlier. I think that's a lot easier to do the transforms. You don't have to worry about writing code. You can just drag and drop. You can just apply the transforms and decide what is the coalesce. It's a nicer interface and it is much easier to use as well. Then email. Yes, email. Email is a form of integration. When you are using inbound email actions, you can actually parse the email subject and or sometimes content to update fields in records. And yes, I know that from my painful personal experience, we did that. We actually updated records. We actually tried to have a data-driven support integration solely through email with a service provider. It was painful parsing the subject, and I would not recommend to do that, but it's possible. And then, of course, it's creating, when you're still in an organization where people send an email to support, this will be your main driver to create cases, to create incidents, and then you'll want to process these. That is also a type of integration. Mentioned before, import sets, but also export sets. It's possible to simply import a flat file of data, and it's been there from the start. It's robust and it works, and you can use it. Similar for export sets, you can push data from an instance to an external file, upload it to either a target system or through a mid server or something. It's usually more of an ad hoc or triggered thing, and I would recommend to consider using REST APIs or even RPA if possible today. His favorite process is scripted REST or scripted SOAP APIs. These work by calling the remote system, sending an HTTP request, getting back an HTTP response that is coming back. You can create your own if you need to for specific things in your instance. For if the table API is not enough, if you want to specify a certain access, you can do that with these scripted REST configurations. There's also for inbound integrations the option to use the inbound REST flow trigger, where you can also determine the request. You can determine what kind of response you do and what you do with these. So it's possible to do error handling in that case, and it usually also supports versioning for that. And then lastly, orchestration. So a couple of notes. I said, we're not deprecating any of these soon, and we don't have any concrete plans. People are asking all the time, considering that Integration Hub has been around for a while. I do want to recommend that anytime you create a new integration, to do these in Flow Designer and Integration Hub, and not use the legacy technology anymore. They do work, and they will still receive bug fixes, but we don't have any innovation around these. There's no development. They don't get any new features. So all innovation happens for Automation Engine, specifically Integration Hub. And the cool thing really about Integration Hub, and we have a slide at the end, just to give you an impression, there are so many spokes. There's a whole discussion to be had for the whole build versus buy conversation. And for the most part, I think there's some argument to be had for the actual actions to be maintained by us for you. So whenever there's a change to the API, version change to the remote system, you don't have to think about that. You can just upgrade your spoke, have the latest version, have the latest functionality, and you don't have to worry about keeping them up to date. So, and with that, we have almost 20 minutes left for some best practices. That makes me very happy. We had a good pace. Awesome. There's, as I told you, there's just so much to cover. This is such a broad topic, and this presentation won't be, I won't claim for this to be exhaustive at all. So there will be more to talk about as we can see from chat. So some guidance and best practices that we want to give you when you start creating integrations. One of them I mentioned at the start, single source of truth. Whenever you do any kind of data replication, be sure to specify which system is the single source of truth, which determines what the state of the data will be on all connected other systems. So you could even consider to make the imported data from the single source of truth, maybe your HR system of record, maybe your CMDB, maybe your, I don't know, other systems that contain records. You want to make sure just one of them is the main source of truth info database, and then all others pull their info from there. Know the data owner. This one's a process thing, but it is important to know who owns the data, who's responsible for keeping it correct and up to date. When you do integrate, make sure you only synchronize the relevant data. So whenever you create new ones, most of the time, you don't have to transfer all of the fields from a table. For your process, maybe it's just a subset of these that are needed on the remote system. Maybe you don't have to pull all of the data from the remote system. Maybe you only need like 10 fields to keep your info up to date. When you do large integration loads, you should start to consider performance. So if there are huge imports, try to have those after hour or during non-peak time of day. If your organization is global and you have customers and users logging in at all times of day, there are options to have your instances in several data centers, and then these could be rolling around the globe. So speak to your account reps for these things. And then lastly, take advantage of staging tables. If real time is not required, this also helps with performance. One of the aspects that were mentioned on some of the slides previously, consider data security. So it's very important to adhere to any security policies to ensure the compliance with your organization's guidelines. Try to use ACLs wherever needed and to limit the access to only be as minimal as is required. You can also assign roles, and the access for those should also be minimal. And then lastly, it's always a good idea when you sync records to have a correlation ID. And the correlation ID is actually available, I think, on all ServiceNow tables. It's been an addition a couple of years back. And what this does is you can store the record ID and the correlation ID of the remote record in that table. So say you have a case on your customer instance and you want to connect it to your incident, you can store the other table's table name and the CICD in those correlation and external record fields. Part 2 of best practices goes over to Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So part 2 in that, and you see the slide, right? Important when you build integrations, saying applications here, I'd start on top right corner. I would actually recommend build your integrations, do it again. Build your integrations as a scoped application. Why do I want that? On the one side, if you do a spoke for Integration Hub, that's one of the conventions anyway. And the other side is if that integration for whatever reason might not be needed anymore down the 6 months, 12 months down the road, you can easily find everything that's tied to that integration, right? Even if it's a global application, doesn't matter. It is an application and everything is kind of contained together. So that's, I really would urge you, use these scoped applications to manage your development. That's what they're there for. As you build, another thing is testing these integrations for performance, right? Quite often, developers, they test 1 record, 5 records, maybe 7 records, but that's where they stop and say it's working. And you hit then production and suddenly you get hundreds or thousands of records. And it's like, oh my God, that takes hours. Why, right? So make sure you test for the load that you really expect to be there, maybe a little bit more than expected, just be on the safe side. That really helps to make it more robust. For some, it might be helpful to create properties, right? As you maybe want to store some parameters, settings, maybe credentials are mentioned here. And with Integration Hub, you shouldn't have credentials and properties, I guess. But for the old REST API one, you might have a lot of properties around that. I don't think this is about the
credential itself. This is for storing maybe the SysID of the credential record.
Yes.
You shouldn't put your credentials in plain text. No.
Things like that, right? Yeah. Create property pages so it's much easier to find them and maintain them. Keep these property pages as part of your scoped app, right? Again, keep it nicely together. So that is just how you create and maintain the content. As you've seen, there's lots and lots of different options that you can use. Make an informed decision of what makes sense for that use case. Not everything has to be a fully automated flow-driven REST API. Maybe a flat file once a week is good enough, right? Make that decision really based on the requirements you have. Plan for non-prod, right? You build integrations to a target system. If you update another target system, make sure you have also a test environment or at least a test setup in place. I do remember a case lots of years ago where somebody made a change on the test environment and suddenly the automation ran forward and did change all passwords of all users in Active Directory on production. Not very happy for the service desk the next Monday morning. right? And it took like 2 hours to figure out what happened, and I was too late, right? Like thousands of user passwords reset, not what you want to do on a test system. So have these separation, make clear test is never writing to a production system, right? And last but not least, all integrations will produce errors one day or another. Something is just not as expected. And there might be the silly things like network not there, into data issues, you get some stuff you don't expect. So plan on how to log these errors and raise maybe incidents or tickets to somebody to check them out, right? If they are silently happening in the back end, nobody noticed them, oh, that is piling up and suddenly you might have a much bigger problem. So think about how you handle these errors and maybe build a framework around it. Integration Hub can help, but it doesn't do it all for you. So build that frame around how to report and how to get back to a break fix or remediation of these.
Yeah. Some tools in place in Action Designer. One is mentioned here, using the retry policy for in the action steps. New features in, I believe, Tokyo. It was San Diego or Tokyo. We added error handling in Action Designer, error handling in Flow Designer. So your say subflow that does the integration or handles the integration has error handling. And third, we have a new flow logic that is called try logic. So you can try to call an API with a flow action for X amount of time. So you can say, run this 5 times until it succeeds. And if it does fail after those this number of repeats, you can also add a wait for duration in there. Then it'll go into the error handling part. Then you can, for example, in the flow error handling, send a notification, raise an incident, or log something. I think that those are really good improvements for in Flow Designer and in Action Designer to handle those errors. Awesome. And then lastly, one of the main things for keeping your automations great and valuable is to measure them, because you won't be able to know what your value is from things like Integration Hub unless you measure it properly. And we're working on a product called Automation Center, and Joe will tell us more about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. So looking at Automation Center, there's a challenge out there that we've identified where organizations are struggling with all these different islands of automation, multiple disconnected point automation tools that are not integrated at the cross-department, across enterprise level, really a fragmented automation governance policy and the oversight, really siloed views into these different areas or islands of automation. Automation Center is a centralized workspace that gives you that single pane of glass for automation opportunity, intake and workflow and vendor agnostic business and operational oversight and all these analytics. And really what that looks like is, if you look here on the right, you have your automation dev manager, your COE leads, executive leadership. They can all look at this dashboard and get insights into like business goals and progress, time and cost savings on your automations. You can compare performance by source, department, lots of different ways to filter the data there. You can see the automations that are deployed and their success rate and how often they're failing. Future automations by intake source, goal, expected time and cost savings. Lots of really valuable analytics for multiple different teams in one workspace. So really a lot of value there. And one thing that we focused on for Utah is, if we want to move to the next slide, Lisa, the ability to also gain insights from some of these third-party systems. So in regards to RPA, here you'll see UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism. We've added a value dashboard that provides real-time insights across all of these different vendors and helps track those business goals as well. So you have KPIs into not only what's going on with your automations in the platform, but also some of those outside of the platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think measuring automation success is very important, because that is something that you as developers or service owners, platform owners can use to justify those extra costs for those licenses. Automation has definitely its benefits, especially if you use the pre-made spokes, if you use pre-made flow templates, if you use Doc-Intel to scan these documents instead of having somebody do data entry manually. Those are valuable hours and so much personal costs that you can save with these. And making use of the tools and the analytics that we have on the platform absolutely helps you to improve on these and to measure them and justify them upstream. All right, we have had so many questions and comments. I am very, very grateful to you. We will check up on some of the things we couldn't answer directly. I will leave you with a couple of resources. As I said, this presentation will be linked on the community. If you have a few minutes, I would love for you to answer these questions that we want to get make sure that our academies are getting better. And then lastly, I promised you some links to other platforms. So we have a bunch of more platform academies. Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on this platform academy. I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. I don't think we have the session posted yet, but the idea for the session in 2 weeks is to talk about upgrades, how to make use of upgrade plans to make your upgrades better and faster, and more specifically, know how to best upgrade to Utah once it goes GA later this month. Awesome. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful time and a wonderful day. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks everyone for being here. Enjoy the session.